10 लोग हैं। मधु, गुन बुक्स, हिमानी।
इनको कोई दिक्कत? चार में 10 बजे।
बाय बाय नीचे पलंग के नीचे चलो नीचे चलो अन्ना थोड़ी सी चीजें क्या है ऐसे
हमारी अम्मा बनाती थी ऐसा प्याज लहसुन के छौंक वाला बहुत अच्छा लगता है। और उसके बाद छुट्टे भी नहीं है तो हम बना नहीं छुट्टे आपको तो पसंद है अपने लिए बनाती और
Good evening and a very warm welcome to everybody. If anybody cannot listen to me at this point, I would request you and I would request their colleagues and friends who can listen to me to help your teachers, your fellow teachers, connect with audio. We've been sending a message in the chat also. I see a lot of teachers are not connected via audio. They have to click the mic button next to the camera. They have to click the mic button next to the camera and connect via internet or device so that they're able to listen to me. We still have another 1 minute before we start the session. I request everybody connect via audio. Hi, good evening, ma'am.
Recording in progress.
Still see a lot of people. connected without audio. It's exactly 4 by my clock. We'll wait for another 1 minute before we start the session. We'll just let everybody join in. And please help your colleagues to join via audio. Just in case they're telling you they cannot hear me, is because they're not connected via audio. I would request everyone to please put their mics on mute. All right, we're 2 minutes, 4 o'clock. At this point, I am muting everybody, and you're not allowed to unmute. So you will not be able to unmute yourself till the end of the session. So I've just muted everyone. You won't be able to. This is just done so that we can proceed with the session without any interruptions. Thank you so much. So good evening, everybody. Once again, welcome to another session of Commune. And today we have amongst us Mr. Saurabh Signapalli, a very well-read resource in English and an author with us as well. He's worked in the English language department for a very long time and comes with a very vast experience in the English language. We're very happy to have you with us, Sir Saurabh. So welcome to the session.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here as well.
I'm very happy to see the topic of today's session. I hope all my participants are equally excited to learn about how to use images in language teaching. I remember one of our resources, Ms. Anuradha Murthy, if anybody remembers, during the onset of Commune, she once mentioned that English is a visual language. And I think I'm reminded of what she said. More than any other language, English specifically, she said, is a visual language. The more children see, the more they're able to visualize the language, the better they're able to learn it. So I think what we are going to learn today somewhere, in some aspect, might connect to what ma'am said at one point and may bring the same thought forward. So with a lot of excitement and a lot of positive anticipation, over to you, sir. Looking forward to how we can use images in language learning.
Right. Thank you so much. That's a very interesting statement that you talked about. And definitely, I wish I'd heard that talk. So I could have made maybe a better connection, but hopefully there are connections that can be made. Can I share screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I'll stay active in the chat box. Teachers, if you have any questions, please keep putting them on the chat box. I'll use them. I'll keep a watch on them, and we'll take them up towards the end of the session.
You can see what I'm sharing, right? This
yes,
first slide. Okay, so as the topic goes, it's using images for language learning. So let me just tell you a little bit about what I'm planning here. I have worked with images before, and I really do believe that images help a lot with language learning of all types. My specific interest, of course, is on using images in teaching writing. So you will find in my presentation, perhaps I'm a little biased towards the writing part, but I have tried to cover all the 4 major skills, which is reading and listening and writing and speaking. But there'll be a few things that I'll talk in greater detail. Others, I'm going to draw parallels, and I'm also going to probably ask you to contribute your suggestions, either in the chat box, or we'll see how better we can do it. So let's begin. So to start with, I just want to show you the statement on top, which says, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I have some questions for you. So how many of you subscribe to this statement, which means how many of you agree with it and how many don't? And what might the reasons be for your position? So I guess you could, someone has said, can I zoom it? So I can make it full screen. Please tell me if it remains shared. So what I'd like you to do, however, is answer this question. I guess through the chat box, is that more efficient?
Yes.
Or
Yes, so I'll
Fine.
take them up. So I've already gotten a couple of agrees on the
Okay.
statement.
Okay. So also, of course, we need the reasons. So if someone could, I know it'll take some time to put it on, but it'll help us. It'll feed
So
our
I've gotten
discussion.
almost everybody to agree to the statement that yes, picture is worth 1,000
Fine.
words. But yes, like Sir said, can somebody put a reason there? It'll be nice to read some reasons also.
Is the screen still shared?
Yes,
Because I
sir.
just
Yes,
went
it's
into
still
full
shared.
screen.
And now it's
Okay.
full screen, sir.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, so I see that, well, at least the people who agree are writing faster. Helps you to remember faster. Okay.
Portrait situation.
Okay,
Portray a
portrait
situation.
situation is not quite clear. If Miss Shraddha could please specify what that means. Okay, helps you to remember quickly. It has more, okay, more sensory organs are involved. Okay.
Midi ma'am said more impact
Okay, fine.
or
So,
description.
okay, great. Is there anyone, so I know we've got a lot of agrees, but I'd also like to know if there's anyone who doesn't agree and what their reason might be. Okay, an image can be understood instantly, while reading 1,000 words would take more time. Yes, that is clear. Of
Correct.
course, there is a caveat here, of course, that we need not, I mean, not everything requires 1,000 words to explain. We could do it in 2 or 3. All kinds of learners can use it. Okay, yes, there are learners who prefer a visual kind of learning style, definitely. Okay, great. So I think we have had enough responses. People can keep giving responses, but I'm going to run with what we've already got and proceed from there. So I can see that multiple people are saying that they agree, and the reasons are varied. They, of course, activate the more sensory organs, or they're more efficient in terms of getting a message across. So an easy example that I think a lot of us may have heard in relation to this statement is, well, let's say we go to a country where we don't really know the language, and we want something, let us say an ice cream. Explaining what an ice cream is, that too without the correct tools or things like that. Let us say we are trying to explain to someone who doesn't know what an ice cream is or something, or has no real familiarity, might be a bit difficult. Whereas you can just show a picture of an ice cream and show that someone's eating it and get that message across faster. So in this context, I'd say yes, you can agree with this statement. But I'm also going to play devil's advocate here and say that there are also reasons, or there are times when one might disagree with this statement and say that, well, it's not always worth 1,000 words. So can anyone put in the chat box when they feel such situations might be? I have already said that I do believe that there are cases where this statement doesn't hold true. So in many cases, yes, you can just show a picture and get things done much faster, or communicate your intent a lot faster. But there are others where they don't really make sense. Because there must be a reason why overall humans have chosen words for many of their languages rather than just an image-based system. I know there are many languages that are ideogram-based or pictogram-based, but what might the reason be that we use words then? Why have we just not gone for a picture-based system?
Maybe because pictures, also sometimes it's a perception. What eyes, yes, somebody wrote the same thing. So
Okay.
Mr. Rajpriya, pictures can have different perceptions.
Correct. There is some ambiguity, perhaps, unless your pictures are extremely clear or something like that. Yes, there is some ambiguity. Sometimes you're not sure how a certain picture is meant to be interpreted. It's just like when we use emojis or emoticons on WhatsApp or any such instant messaging service. Occasionally, when someone uses an emoji, I can't make out what exactly that is supposed to mean. Are they happy? Are they confused? Are they sad? Or just something else altogether? So yes, pictures can have multiple interpretations. Someone else has said, that is Dilpreet, who said that emotions and feelings can't be explained in picture. And yes, that is correct. Critical thinking. So if Ms. Divya can tell us what that means, then we can take that further. But I really like the responses which are coming out, because that is what I also want to make a point about. So let me move on to this other slide. As you can see, right, context is more important in the picture. When you need lengthy conversation explanation, yes, words are a must. Correct. So if you look at these two things that you see in front of us, I've used a picture for an item here, and I guess all of you can easily tell me that's a tree. And in many languages, they have different words for it, and fair enough. But look at the other word, which is on the right, and this word concept. Now, how exactly would you describe it with a picture? How would you describe this word? And I've just chosen a random example. I mean, I could have chosen others. This is not the only word. So it's not impossible to do. You could use pictures and do something. But I'm sure you can understand that this is not very easy to explain just with a picture. It may probably need words to explain what concept itself means. And I'm using this more as a meta narrative because concept, again, various concepts, abstract concepts. Someone said emotions. Yes, it is difficult to say what anger means. Yes, you could show a picture of a person being angry. Anger is easy, but okay, someone said we use this emoji for namaste, but when we want to give details, it's a high five. Okay. So yes, certain things are very easy to explain with pictures. And yes, in those cases, I agree. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Certain others, more abstract things, need words. So I do agree. After all, my session is called Images and Language Teaching. I agree that we have to use images more. Images can clarify a lot of things. At the same time, we must also recognize the limitations of images or recognize why words are there in the first place. Otherwise, we might want to recommend a more image-driven kind of language, right? But the words are there because certain things need to be explained. Sometimes even pictures need to be explained. I'm seeing responses, and all of those responses are more or less correct. That is what I'm trying to get at. So all of this discussion, because I just want to clarify what this session is about. I feel in different contexts and different situations, pictures do have their advantages, but in some others, words have advantages. Each of them has to be used with some consideration to maximize their strengths. So while I'm saying this session is on images and language teaching or language learning, I'm not saying it's going to be only images. I think one of the best ways in which images work when you're talking about language learning or language teaching is actually seeing how they interact together. Because after all, you want to teach people maybe the meanings of words eventually about language, or teach people certain concepts or ideas. So you might want to use some of those as well. You can use only images, that's not a problem. But occasionally, in fact, I think in a lot of cases, if you combine words and images, then you can really get, you can really, I would say, turbocharge how you use images, right? So these are the two things I'm going to talk about today: how words and images interact together, and how we can better leverage this interaction for language learning or language teaching. And the second one, my focus often is on narratives and stories because I find that very, very interesting. I think a lot of how we entertain ourselves, whether it's through literature or film or anything, is actually through narratives. Now, of course, language learning is not just to narrate stories, it's for other reasons as well. But my focus is here because I feel it's an interesting way of learning language. So you'll see a lot of my examples are based on using the power of narratives to generate motivation and also for other benefits in language learning. So these are the couple of things that I'm going to talk about, right? So at any point, if there's a question, please put it in the chat box because I'm going to keep running forward. And if you feel that you can't hear me or I'm speaking too fast, please mention that as well so that I can correct myself. Okay, so having said that, let's start. Like I said, I'm going to focus on each of the 4 major skills. So I'm going to start with images and reading. Like I said, okay, before I go on to what I look at often or what attracts me in using images and using images specifically for learning how to read or teaching how to read, I'd like to know again in the chat box if there are any initial ideas, suggestions, tasks that any of you might have used which involve images and which require or help the learner to read. Anything that you might have used. Yes, there's a point made here which says, okay, someone is saying to teach grammar. Okay, excellent. I know the chat box is perhaps not very conducive to this, but Okay, you use flashcards, okay, to teach poems. Excellent. Okay. But if you could also add some details of how the image is used there. So there is an image which accompanies the poem. Okay, family tree, interesting. So prepositions, how is the image used with prepositions? So you position things, you show image of something under something else or over something else, I'm assuming. Okay. To teach story writing through pictures. Yes, indeed. And that is something I'm going to talk about later. To teach good manners. That's rather interesting. So if anyone could give some details there as well. Okay, showing pictures of characters in a story. Okay, excellent. Okay, so there are lots of ideas here, and I'm glad to see that because I'm certain that a lot of us as language teachers, we use pictures in various ways for various exercises, and reading is one of the things that many people have used it for. There are, if you do just a very, very basic search on the internet on Google Scholar or something, you'll find innumerable papers on reading and pictures and picture books and other things, how you use images for reading, things like that. So yes, indeed. Uh, okay, poetic devices, grammar concepts. So some of these, of course, I will understand better if there are details, but it's okay. I just wanted to know what you use it for, so that's great. So let me move on and give some other suggestions also, and also talk about how I might also use images. Like I said, my focus is often on narratives and narrative images. So again, now let me change the question, and you can please answer that in the chat box. Are you all aware of any image-based narrative, which means an image-based story? I saw some suggestions on top, but if we could please answer this question. Image-based story, because like I said, I'm going to focus on narratives. Picture composition, okay, these are all still tasks that we are talking about. Could you please answer this question? Any image-based story that any of you are aware of? Stories that use images. So I think someone said picture books, a number of comments above. Picture talk, okay, these are all tasks. Okay, comic books, yes, excellent, because that is what I'm going to talk about now. Narration based on pictures. Okay, great. So we have some examples of tasks and some examples of images. Picture description, yes, again, that is an interesting task as well. Okay, let me move on. Comic strips, yes, indeed. Champak, sure. Okay, so let me deal with comics. Now, I really love comics. I read a lot of them, and I use them in my teaching as well when it seems to aid what I'm trying to do. So I'm not going to talk so much about it. There are many studies which say that using sequential art, and there is a reason why I'm giving this phrase sequential art. So this phrase actually comes from someone called well, actually Will Eisner, but it is also repeated by other comics theorists called Scott McCloud and others. They call it sequential art because it is kind of art, or it is pictures, but it is always set in a sequence in a comic strip. So if you look at this thing that I have on the right, it is taken from one of the issues of an Amar Chitra Katha. You might have recognized that from the style here. So as you can see, you know very clearly how you're supposed to proceed in sequence. If you cannot read, so you know that the top rectangle has to be read first, then the bottom left side rectangle, and then the last one is the bottom right side rectangle. So we are trained to read from left to right, and that is the same logic that and also in case of images, top to bottom. So that is the same logic we follow here. So this is like visuals in sequence. You can also see that I've chosen a particular text where there are lots of words. So words, of course, interact with the images here as well. The words alone could tell the story. The image alone maybe could tell at least part of the story, but together they make things much, much clearer. So the line that I've put there on the left, it aids comprehension. It helps people to understand. Sometimes there are actually certain things that depend on what is happening visually in that picture. Okay. And of course, it improves learner engagement. We know that, especially today, we live in a visual world. People are very unused to huge blocks of text, but they are used to images everywhere. And so it'll help them to engage a little more. Now, why have I said sequential art is important? Because you could very well show one single image with some text on it. Good, this is fine. You can do it for reading. But after all, eventually when you want to read, you want a certain amount of depth eventually to that reading. Even if it is a story for a first grader or even a younger kid, you want a few things that come one after the other. Okay, whether it has words or not here is immaterial, but a few things that come after the other, whether it is words coming one after the other or images coming one after the other. So you can build a narrative and that generates interest. If I just had one picture, again, I might be able to interpret it in a certain way, but I wouldn't really define that as reading. Then, yes, of course, there is some comprehension task going on, but reading works better if you have a slightly in-depth thing. Now, the only thing is, if this were for a first grader, there would be a lot less text and the images would be of a different style. Okay, but I think there would still be 3 panels or 4 panels or 5 panels or more panels actually. The more you push it, the more the story takes shape and the more the learner is also driven to pursue that, right? They're not going to say, okay, why is this going on so long? Unless the story is boring, of course. So again, this is why sequential art is important or sequential narratives are important, even with images. Not just using a single image, but rather having sequences, and which is why comics are so powerful, especially as reading texts. I think comics have a lot of potential. There's a variety of comics that are available, of course, both in India and abroad, and any of these can be adapted to our classes. We can create new ones also. I mean, as teachers, we are all very creative. We prepare a lot of material, and a certain type of comic can also be created. You don't always have to create it from scratch because there's a number of things already available. Depending, of course, on the copyrights and all of that, you can use some of it, and there is free material available too. So you can use that. And eventually, sometimes you can even take I mean, I'm showing you all this as a soft copy and it's on screen, but you can actually take certain things to class. Now, one concern, of course, here with comics is that you might say, if you have to give it as a hard copy, they take up too many pages. I agree. If you have to give a narrative in a comic, what you might be able to give as one paragraph of just text as a sequential narrative of images may take up maybe 3 pages or 4 pages. I understand. I mean, there are ways to get around this. One is, of course, you have to do a kind of shared reading by just showing them, either dividing them into groups and giving one hard copy in each group, something like that. If you have the resources for it, of course, one per person is fine. If you have the resources which allow you to use, say, presentations in class like these, then you can maybe do a shared reading by showing it on screen like I'm doing right now. So these are all alternatives. Of course, showing on screen means you have to have the right apps. PowerPoint is not the best app to read comic books. There are others, but yes. So, okay. This is the point that I wanted to make about sequential art, of course, using comics. I know picture books are helpful, and I'm going to deal with that in a couple of slides, but I really feel the best thing here, and everyone can disagree with me. I know I'm biased for comic books because I really like them myself, but it is possible to disagree. I just feel that there are various situations, especially for reading, where comics or sequential art are extremely useful. Like I said, it doesn't have to be text even. Although having text and image together helps a great deal, because eventually you want those words in context and images help provide the context. The words help building up that language thing, but images are not required. You can have a simpler thing where you just have a story happening and they're reading the story without actually reading the words, but you're just interpreting the story. And that is also reading. Eventually, what is reading? It is comprehension, it is interpretation, it is understanding. So they are understanding even without words. And there are other uses for silent comics, but we'll see that in the production tasks later. Okay. So of course, if you have any questions at any point, please just list them in the chat box. I'll continue to move on. So I just wanted to show why comics are important. Okay. I'm not saying, of course, that the images that I've used here are the most appropriate for your learners. But look at this. This is from a very popular comic book. These days, superheroes, especially because of the Marvel movies and to some extent, the DC movies are very, very popular. So here you go. Here's a comic on Wonder Woman, who's one of the superheroes, right? So why are comics so powerful? Because I feel they use text at multiple levels. That's what the slide title also says. You have what you call, and these are technical terms that you use in the comic book industry as well. You have something which resembles spoken dialogue, which is in this bubble here on the right-hand side, what Wonder Woman is speaking. It's called a speech balloon or a speech bubble. At the same time, you also have something which resembles narrated text. So it's called a caption. So it describes what is happening, although the picture itself is giving that clue, but it also describes what maybe certain people might be thinking or what people are doing exactly with their, I mean, what exactly is going on in the image, essentially. So what she's saying or vocalizing is already mentioned here. What is being narrated by the third person narrator is here. And then there's also these things, which are like this punch, bam, pow, things like that, which although somewhat may not seem very important, that is how comic books bring in the element of sound. Movies, of course, do this by their sound effects or other effects, but comics can introduce that as well, and they are kind of words as well. They add interest for the reader as well. So it's not meanings; they are actually sounds. You can call them onomatopoeia, just like the poetic device. So you use these sounds here, and that is also one way in which learners get introduced to language. So I feel there is text at multiple levels that comics actually use, especially these more slightly standard type comic books, which we are looking at here. I'm not saying every single comic will have these, but a lot of them have these combination of multiple levels of text. And for that reason, it helps learners to engage with these at multiple levels. Now, in a book as well, which doesn't use images, in a picture book as well, this is achieved. You know that the quotation marks talk about spoken text or actual dialogues, and the rest of the text, of course, is the third person narrative or whatever person narrative it is. So comics replicate that, but they bring in the images as well. They also have this element of sound and things like that. Anything comics can do, a normal book can do, but the only difference is comics have images, and that helps bring in an extra dimension and helps the learner to understand and also engage with the text. And wherever they feel that the text itself is not clear, the image can clarify things for them. So both of them in tandem work such that it really makes it quite easy for learners, very useful for learners to progress with such comics or things. Of course, you have to select a comic depending on what your learners need to learn and, of course, what age your learners are at. But once you do that, I think, and we'll discuss this further, how this can be selected better. But once you do that, I think they have great power and great use. Fine, there are other tools as well. I'm not going to spend too much time because I'm aware that I have a restricted amount of time and it's already 4:27. So let's move on. So other tools that you can use, yes, of course, you can use picture books, as many of you have said. They combine image and text in diverse ways. In fact, all the textbooks that we have, I think you'll notice that they're essentially picture books, especially the narrative part, which means all our textbooks, language textbooks especially, have stories with some pictures, poems with some pictures, things like that. So essentially, they are picture books. And the reason why I think textbooks use these pictures, I think when I was studying, textbooks had pictures, but a lot less pictures. They were fewer in number. Now we use images a lot because I think there is a recognition all over the world that images help. They help to clarify, they help to raise the interest level of the learner, no matter at what age group you are in. So even a 10th grade student would have pictures in their textbooks, right? You can also use shorter comic strips for a touch of humor. So you can use comic strips themselves, but I mentioned need to check for age appropriate selections because usually comic strips, although it may feel that it's only 3 panels, 3 very short panels, are actually, according to me, more appropriate for older learners because comic strips, the way they are written, generally have some wit and humor, which requires a little bit of maturity in terms of language also to understand. Sometimes they have words which sometimes they use puns or things like that. So again, I think generally these shorter comic strips work better with older learners. For the younger learners, you might actually need slightly longer narratives in terms of the numbers of images used or number of panels used. But yeah, this is just my opinion. You can disagree with it as well. This is what I feel, that if you're using shorter comic strips, and I'm assuming all of you know what I mean by comic strips because I've used a few as well. So I suggest these can be used with older learners. Fine. So right now I wanted to pause the learning to read part here and discuss other sub skills as well. Oh yes. So what about solo images? Can single images be used? I discussed this earlier as well. Yes, these can be used if you feel that in a single image itself, there's enough text, which helps the learner to engage with both the text and image well. Or if that solo image is so rich that there is so much interpretation happening, which you can say is, okay, like reading for the learner. Fine. But in general, I feel, so I wouldn't say never use solo images for a reading purpose. No, you could use it, but then that image would have to be really rich in terms of the content it has. And by that, I mean, You can't just show a portrait like, and that's it with no background, nothing. It would have to have a lot of things happening even in that solo image. Or there has to be text or enough text which allows them to use that in terms of reading. But in general, what I feel is a sequence of images is always going to be better for the purposes of reading. Even silent comics, and by silent comics, we mean comics which have just the images in different panels sequentially arranged, but don't have any text at all. Even silent comics can be used for this. But actually, my opinion is that silent comics are more appropriate for speaking tasks, and I'll tell you why. But silent comics can work for reading tasks as well. They can work very well for reading tasks also because there is some comprehension going on over there. Okay. So solo images can be used, but preferably, I think a sequence of images like we see in comic books is better. So you don't have to develop an entire comic book. Even having 5 images is a sequential narrative, and that's fine. Okay, let me move on to listening then. For listening, I've really not said much. I feel there's a lot of material out there for listening. Anything, so yes, video, movies, animation, all of these can be used for this purpose. If you're going to, and I think it is already being used for this purpose. You want learners to listen and you want to bring in an element of image in there, then you bring in something which uses language, of course. You can't just listen by watching a silent movie, but yes, any kind of, I think, now, of course, I have a question there, so let me not say any kind. But yes, videos, movies, or animation can be used for this purpose. There's a lot of material available, some of which can be adapted and repurposed, some others, and you can also, again, create certain things from scratch, but it's more difficult, of course, to create video, movies, animation. So you might have to use material already available. In this regard, let me also say that captioned and subtitled videos can help a lot. I know that it may seem like there is an overlap here with reading, but actually I would say subtitles are actually primarily still listening. It's just that while you're listening, there's something which is assisting you. Those captions are assisting you. And I think there are already enough articles here. There's enough discussion on same language subtitling, especially. So if I'm someone who's learning, say, Hindi, and I'm watching a Hindi movie, the subtitles ought to be in Hindi so that I can learn that Hindi better, rather than the subtitles in English, which are translating it, but then I'm getting distracted from the Hindi listening that I had to do. So I think captioned subtitle videos can help further. I'm not saying every time you show a video to your learners, have captions in there. No, sometimes when you think it is appropriate, then they can help quite a lot. So again, if there are any suggestions, let's interact in the chat box once more. Just let us give it 2 minutes or maybe 1 minute. Can you use any video? What do you think? Is every video possible to be used? So let me just answer that question. Let me leave the other suggestions for you to put in the chat box. Well, on the face of it, okay, why not? You could use any video. But of course, once again, you have to think about the context, think about your learner level. So there's obviously certain kind of videos that you cannot use with learners. But some others, especially those designed specifically for younger age groups, for learning purposes, you can, of course, right? Okay, you can play the chapters video, correct? Yeah, for those textbooks that have videos associated with the chapters, you can play that. Yes, indeed. I assume that is what Meenal means. Okay, videos related to the topic, of course. Yeah, not for all the time. I agree. Yes. Facial expression videos. Okay, I'm not sure what that means, but okay, maybe to describe how facial expressions are. Okay, specific learning videos. Okay, great. Something that can't be explained verbally. Yes, can't be explained very, very easily. Could be, yes. Described by any kind of images, by the way, not just by videos. We can use other pictures, but yes, video can help. Video with explanation. Now, remember, of course, I'm asking for suggestions which are related to listening because this particular slide is on listening. So that is what I'm focusing on at the moment, because all your suggestions are valid, but let us focus also on the listening part of it. Sorry. Okay, sometimes interlink videos of other subjects with grammar content, and you can use it. Yes, correct. But let us, and indeed, you can use it for grammar explanation videos. But I'm talking specifically to practice the skill of listening. So again, over there, I feel narrative type videos are the best. I have a slide later on how to deal with non-narrative things and things, because we want to teach them other things also, right? But we'll discuss it. So my language lab, of course, yes. But then in Language Lab, do you use images quite frequently? Are your videos, I mean, are your audio segments supported by video or images? Okay, showing videos enhances the interest and attention of the students. Compensation videos. Okay, I don't know what compensation videos means. Okay, you can show English language websites if they have certain videos. Okay. Yes, of course. So again, very good suggestions. All of these can help. So we'll look at listening again a little later if needed, because frankly, this I think is the best way to bring in images when you're trying to look at listening. You will need, of course, some kind of animation or video because you need spoken stuff. You can, of course, now let me talk a little more. You don't always have to use videos. Sometimes you can play audio or you can be doing the talking yourself, but you can give learners an image. You can either show it on screen, you can draw something on the board, or you can give them handouts. You can give people an image. The image will help clarify what they are listening to. So just like for reading, they are comprehending by actually looking at the stuff and by reading what is there. But in this case, they're listening to something you are saying or something which is playing. And then they're looking at something in front of them, which helps them to imagine better, understand better what is being told to them. And this can be done even with non-narrative style, let us say texts or audio material. Okay. Yes. So as Ms. Rajeshwari is saying, yes, audio is helpful, but listening skills can be honed by videos with correct pronunciation. Yes, correct. So which is why I also feel that yes, videos are much more useful, but this is not the only way. You don't need to think always that, okay, I want to use images, I want to do a listening task, I will have to use a video. No, you can use other things also, but videos just seem to be so much more convenient. And these days, learners are just used to having a lot of video around. So it kind of makes sense that we use what they anyway see in real life as well, right? Okay, audiobooks can be used, yes, indeed. Announcements of public places, yes, correct, that can be used as well, but then that may lack images unless you're showing the announcement screen also together with it. That would be really authentic, wouldn't it? You show that railway station screen, and then you are also playing the audio in the background. I think that makes a lot of sense. So we're combining image and audio to, you know, achieve our purpose. Okay, great. I think we'll move on from here. So I'm going to now talk about writing. As I said, a lot of my own research and work has been on writing. So what you can see here is during my PhD study, I had used many images, which I used as what I call prompts, and we're going to discuss prompts on the next slide to help learners to write. So what are image prompts? So we're moving on to production skills here, which is writing and speaking. Now, reading, it's clear you look at something which is in front of you and you read that. Listening also, okay, you listen to some audio, video with image in it, something like that. Now, production skills, of course, means learners have to do something on their own. We can't just show them something and say, here's an image and now done. They have to do something from it. So when we're doing writing, we actually want learners to write. Okay. But now, how do we achieve this with images? One thing, of course, you could say, and you would be right, is that we will ask them to create images. Fair enough. We can ask them to create images. But remember, a lot of our languages are word-based. So we need to bring in the element of words as well. So again, we could ask them to create comic books. If they're familiar enough with that, they could do that. It is a time-consuming task, but they can do it. But often you will want them to write full essays or text or something like that. So again, I'm going to focus more on narrative aspects. We will discuss later non-narrative segments as well. So I want to first clarify what I mean by this thing called prompts. Anytime we want to make any learner write, I'm sure we use prompts, right? So here is an example of a prompt. A prompt can be very simple also, by the way. What I've given on the left-hand side here is a slightly more detailed prompt, which says write a story of about 300 words based on the following situation. It starts with a few lines and then leaves the learner to complete this. See, when we talk about production skills, we need practice. So writing needs that practice, speaking also needs that practice. So we want them to practice writing, but we are just giving them something which they can use as a launch pad or as a starting point to facilitate their writing. And that is what a prompt is. So a prompt is something that facilitates writing. Now, what is on the left-hand side is a text prompt. And even something as simple as write an essay on your best friend is also a text prompt, right? Because it just gives you a clue of what am I supposed to write about. You can very well go into class and say, okay, write. But then the students will be at a loss. They're like, what do I write about? What can I write about? I'm not getting any idea. So to facilitate the writing, we give them prompts. This is quite clear, and all of you know this. Now, on the right-hand side, we have an image prompt. Again, quite clear. All of you would have used images as prompts also at some time in your teaching careers, and you may be using it very frequently as well. So here's an image, which is about something. And the learner is asked to write a story of about 300 words based on this image. So there's a sample text prompt on the left and a sample image prompt on the right. So now, because my further discussion in this section is going to depend heavily or talk about prompts quite a lot, I just want to make it clear that people understand what prompts are. They are just these things that help learners to get started with their writing or facilitate their writing by just giving them this starting point. Okay, now, how can these be used best? So let me talk about writing prompts. So writing prompts are the most common tools used to help learners practice writing. The other model being essays, stories, things like that, as in you give them something which they can describe and all of that. But writing prompts essentially is how you make them write. Okay. Images are often used as such writing prompts, but there needs to be a system based on which image selection is done. So far I've just been saying you can use this comic, we can use this video. Now in this section, I have some discussion on how can we use these? I mean, is there some logic as to how we select these? So my research essentially has been about this, and I've looked at a few other writers as well and done some experimentation in some schools in India. So I'm just going to talk about what I found. Now, I'm not saying that this will 100% apply to every single situation, but I think it is something worth considering when you are thinking, okay, now I want to use an image as a writing prompt. But what kind of image should I be using? Is there some advantage to certain types of images? So that's what I'm trying to look at, right? So I'll tell you what I found. So what I found is, and I was studying a number of elements. I did not study here whether a line drawing or photograph or something like that is more useful, because there are already studies to that which deal with that. And there are some who feel that yes, for older learners, maybe adult learners or something like that, maybe photograph kind of thing might be useful. But in general, more abstract kind of images work better. But I'm not dealing with that. I'm instead looking at what should be inside the picture. Okay, so or how pictures can be combined together. So I mentioned during the reading section that using a number of images together, like in a sequence, is better for reading. So I wanted to test this for writing as well. So if I use a number of images, like 1 image, 2 image, 3 image, 4 image, 5 separate images together, will that be a better situation for the learner if they are to write, rather than just giving them one picture and saying, okay, now write from this. So in the study, what we found was that sets of at least a couple of images work better. Sometimes if you go up to 5 images, it is slightly detrimental for the learner, unless there is something else, because they become confused that there's too much information. But 2 or occasionally 3 images work better, because then they're forced to make connections between the 2 images when they're developing, let us say, a narrative or a story. Okay. 1 image works okay, but again, unless it is very rich, if there is more material in terms of 2 separate images or something like that, it tends to work better. Now, the level of action in the image. So if you look at the image example, which is given on the right-hand side, there's something which is called dynamism. So I was trying to look at, okay, now do you give a still image like a portrait of a person, or do you need to have something happening in the image, some kind of action happening in the image? And what we found was having dynamic images, which have at least some kind of action, movement, something like that. So what you can see here, those 2 little lines around the stick that the man is holding and the man's leg, those are actually what you call motion lines. Images, even in static images, you can use these motion lines to indicate that there is some kind of dynamic action happening. He's running, there is some dynamism in there, and this kind of image works better if you're going to ask learners to write based on it. Similarly, we also looked at the level of detail and background in the image. And again, we found that richer backgrounds, again, give learners more stuff to write with, and hence they can produce a greater variety of writing as well. We don't want every single learner in the class to produce the same thing, right? That would be a picture description task where we are saying, okay, here, describe this man or something like that. But eventually, our writing tasks are always going to build up into something that makes them write by themselves quite a lot, and which encourages variety. Each learner could write something different if they wanted to. That's what we want to do. So in that case, we need more detail in the background. Again, there should be some focus on specific elements, which means I was testing whether you need certain things foregrounded in the image, which means certain things in front, some others at the maybe not so much in front, or can everything be at the same level, like there is some fairground scene and various things are happening at the same level. Again, having something which is centrally focused or which is more prominent in the image always helps. So these were a few things that I found with regard to how the image could be structured. So you could create your own images using this. Again, I'm sure you'll have some questions. I've gone through this a little fast. But if you're selecting images to give as writing prompts to learners, let us try to use images that have a little bit of action in them, preferably, have some amount of detail in the background rather than totally a blank background or something like that, and which foreground certain elements. Because when there are many things in the image, certain things still need to be foregrounded. So the learners have a central object or a couple of central objects to focus on. Okay. And the number of images, if you can use 2 images like this, maybe that might actually encourage and tell learners, now write a story based on both these images. And then that might actually give you a larger variety of responses, right? Okay. Each student can write a different ending of the story if the image is incomplete. I'm looking at some of your comments just to see, I mean, gauge the pulse of the room. Right, I think that makes sense. But image is incomplete, what you mean to say, and I think that's an important point. I'm just trying to interpret what you're saying. That is by Gunjan Gupta. I think what you're trying to say is you don't give the ending of the story or don't give a clear ending. Yes. In fact, I wanted to make this point. In reading, I said comics help and sequential images help. And usually in reading cases, you want the story to be complete, whether it is 5 panels or 20 panels or 5 pages or whatever. But you want the story to be complete because only then there is a satisfactory kind of feeling to that reading. But in terms of writing, when you're giving prompts, do not use comics or do not use a full story. We tried that. We experimented on that in our study, and that really ends up straitjacketing all the learners into just one direction. They can already see the complete story. So all they are doing is interpreting it and just writing what they're reading, essentially. It's like giving them a story as a full text and then just saying, write a story based on this. No, that doesn't work. So I think if that was what Gunjan Gupta was saying, yes, excellent. So that is a very good point. And that's what I also wanted to point out. Please don't use things which are full-on sequential stories because with the entire story told to them, because that forces the learner into one direction. They will end up just writing exactly what you've shown them. That's it. Whereas I think our objective is to ensure that they write more and think more. They think and then write. And to do that, we cannot give them a complete story. So use a couple of images, which leaves a lot to their imagination. So each learner can develop it in their own way. Right, here are some examples of what I mean by different types of images. This is the kind of thing we had used in the study. So in this case, we tried to use images which were very unrelated to each other. And as you can see, these are plain background because in the study, it is important to make sure that other things are not interfering. Was it because of the background or not or something? So we had to remove all of that. So we found that when there were a couple of images, they tended to write more and try to make more connection. When there were too many images like that, they got forced into writing in a certain direction, even though there is no clear ending or something. I'm not saying you cannot use more images, you can, but I think these 5 images with the age group of the learners, which was class 5 that we were dealing with, it put them under a little too much pressure. Then they had to do weird things with their stories to make sure the coconut vendor was also there and the car was also there and everything. So it is somewhat counterproductive. So having 2 images or maybe 3 at the most kind of work better if you're going to use different numbers of images. Here is an example of what we did for dynamic and non-dynamic. There's a lady standing next to a bus and there's a lady chasing after a bus. And this one with clear motion lines is also shows things moving, and that kind of worked better, this kind of thing. These, by the way, these were not the only sets. We had other sets also of the same sort. I'm just giving an example so that you understand what I mean by. So we found that this kind of thing is better, the thing on the right. Again, no background versus background. And again, we found more detail over there is better, the thing on the right again. Similarly, so what I meant by no central focus is what you can see on the left. You can see various elements, but a lot of them are at the same level. Whereas here on the right-hand side, you can clearly see that the 2 kids near the cotton candy stall seem to be highlighted. So that gives learners a focus on what can I talk about. Otherwise, somehow they tend to sometimes get confused as to, okay, what is this? I'll just say it's a fairground scene or something. So it pushes learners that, okay, why not? How about these kids? It doesn't mean they have to talk about these, but often that gives them some place to start with. Okay. Okay. Now, let me move on. So what did this study actually help for? And now I just want to talk a little bit about research aspects. So for language teaching, of course, it gave a better idea. The study that I had conducted, it gave me a better idea of how images can be used for writing tasks, specifically within the communicative language teaching framework. In terms of visual communication, because my work was also to understand images a little bit, it contributes to the discussion on how various elements of an image that you put inside an image, how they interact with each other, how we arrange them together, how they can understand how they can, affect the way the image is understood by a viewer or a reader. So that can help when you're also designing and developing images for reading. Sometimes that can help. But mostly my focus here is on writing. So, and finally, for materials design, when you're developing textbooks, you're developing things to put in exams, you want to use an image that you think should be a writing prompt in your examination. Again, what kind of image do you use? So let me also go. So this gives us an idea of, okay, maybe if I have these elements, it might make it easier for learners to write, whether in an examination or in an assignment or as a classroom task. So there's a lot of scope for further research because we are perhaps running a little short of time. Yeah, we are. So let me just run through this. All I'm saying is if any of you would like to pursue research in the area, there's a slight digression from what I'm actually talking about in the main presentation. Please go ahead because you can study images as the output of writing tasks as well. When I said you can ask them to create a comic book or create an image and all of that, yes, that can be done. I have not myself done a very detailed study on that, but there is scope for you to do it as well. These are things that we can understand better and help our learners better with. So this can also, of course, be extended to other language skills such as reading and listening and things like that, this kind of study. And those who are interested in checking it out for other subjects, as you know, the NEP is talking about integration of subject and art integration in subjects and all that. You can explore that as well, not just for language learning, to see what roles they might have in subjects like maths or science, things like that. And you can also study at higher levels. You can study how images and image prompts work as cultural artifacts, things like that. But all of that is just ideas for you to study further if any of you are interested. So let me get back to our main topic. So images and learning to speak. Now, a lot of these points have overlap with each other. You remember picture description tasks, right? We can use picture description tasks, but as Pitcorder says, there is a difference between talking about pictures and talking with pictures. So picture description task essentially is asking learners to talk about pictures. This can be used at various levels, not a problem, especially for descriptive language learning and things like that. We can ask them to describe pictures. But if we make the mistake sometimes of thinking of pictures only in terms of picture description, and I think that is a problem. Eventually, what we want learners to do, and which is a higher skill that we want them to do, is we want them to talk with pictures or write with pictures, which means use the pictures to write something of your own. Use the pictures to speak about something or think about something and then speak about it. So I think the example that Pitcorder gives is of the Eiffel Tower. You can give a picture of the Eiffel Tower and ask the learner, now speak about what is in the picture. And the learners can say, okay, here's a tower. It is a very tall tower and that's about it. And that's fine. So if you're doing a description kind of exercise at a simple level, you can use this. But eventually, I think we want to get them to speak with it, which means, okay, here is the Eiffel Tower. Now, you know that it's in France and it is one of these very famous landmarks. Now, can you tell me a time when you had visited a very famous landmark in India? It doesn't even have to be about the Eiffel Tower. And that will get learners to think, get them to start thinking. So it is just something to give them an anchor first, talk about something first, and then ask them to talk about something else. So essentially, talking with pictures is what I think we should be trying to get learners to do more often. There is no problem with getting them to talk about pictures. That's perfectly fine. But eventually, we want to use the pictures to prompt them to say more. So yes, these are speaking prompts, just like we discussed writing prompts in the previous section. So just like speaking is a production task, just like writing, right? So some of the image prompts that we saw in the previous section for teaching writing, they can be adapted for speaking tasks as well. But apart from this, you can also use sequential narratives like comics for speaking tasks as well. And or both the production tasks, both speaking and writing, So let me just show you the next thing. Hold on, please. It's just here. Okay. So here's an example. Has the background shifted? I mean, are you able to look at what I'm showing now, or is it still on my slide?
It's shifted, sir.
It shifted. Great. So here's an example of a task which can be used. This is a comic, okay, which can be used for writing as well as speaking, a production task. I showed you one example of a different type when we were discussing writing. So here you have a comic, which is Supandi, for those of you who read Tinkle and like Tinkle. This character is Supandi, of course, and as you know, he does some stupid things at times. But the text boxes have been blanked out. The narrative box is retained here. This is one style of task that can be given. And you ask them to complete the story. You ask them to complete it while speaking because essentially the dialogue boxes are gone, but you could also do it for writing. So it can work for both production tasks. So this is the kind of example that I wanted to give for as a speaking task. You can use it for that purpose as well. Now, of course, this here is an example of what you can use as writing. It is reading. This is also a sequential art or comic, you could say. Yes, of course. But another thing that you can do is, so for example, after they've finished writing these dialogues, or once this has happened, you could even say, okay, now imagine the situation is carrying on further. What will both the characters say? So just like we have used text prompts, that example of the text prompt I showed further, where we show one part and then say, okay, now how do you continue further? You can use these also as writing or speaking tasks. You can say, okay, now this is what has happened so far. Now, how will this auto driver and this other person interact? Let's have a role play or a skit in groups or in pairs where each of you come and talk about it and present it in class. So that way also you can use images and narrative, sequential narratives like this for speaking tasks as well, right? So I just wanted to discuss these also. Okay, now let us go back to what we were talking about here. Let me just conclude because I know it's getting right at the edge of the time I was given. We need some time to discuss questions as well. Let me conclude. So in conclusion, we have looked at speaking, listening, writing, reading, all of these. And I've tried to give a very, very brief overview. I know that some of these things are not detailed and you might have a lot of questions as to how we can adapt it. Like I said, I like comic books a lot. So maybe my focus has been highly on narrative type things. And therefore, my examples have also been for descriptive or narrative sort of writing or speaking or tasks that we have for the learners, because I find them very interesting. I feel that is a very easy way of getting the learners to naturally also engage with language. But what about non-narrative or non-descriptive type of communication? Because these are also things that we need to teach them. For example, we need to teach them argumentative writing, or we need to teach them how to write an essay on something, informative type of writing. How do we do this? For example, I'm just talking about writing here, but also the other tasks, right? So images can help with these as well. You can give them as prompts for production tasks. So I'll give an example for argumentative writing on the next slide for a higher age group. How image prompts can be used for argumentative writing as well. They can also be used as material for, okay, here. They can also be used as material for reception tasks, which means reading, for example. You can give infographics for reading or documentaries for listening. So it's not that we only need stories, or stories are the only situations in which images can be used. I have focused on narrative stuff because, like I said, I'm very interested in it. And I think that's a very natural way of getting learners to learn. But we can use other aspects also. Images are used everywhere, infographics, documentaries, things like that. So what I meant by production task for writing, for instance, let us say, here's an advertisement. So you can use authentic tasks here. This would, of course, be a task for a slightly higher age group because you need those interpretive skills. So the example task here is, look at the image given here. What do you think its creator is trying to say? Do you agree with the message? Write an essay on this topic, giving reasons for your position. So a slightly complex task, hence for slightly higher age groups. And as you can see, this requires some interpretation. It requires you to understand that what is shown here is not exactly a gun, but rather a key, a car key, which is repurposed into the shape of a gun. And the message just says that it takes one life every 25 seconds, and hence you have to drive safe. So something like that. This is, of course, much simpler because most people are not going to disagree with driving safe. But you can also give things which are slightly more discussion possible. So I just wanted to give this example to say that you can use images very well for prompting argumentative writing as well, or for prompting an argumentative speaking task as well. So it is not just focused on narrative alone or description alone. It can be used very well for these situations as well. Anyway, that's where I just wanted to stop. It's exactly 5. I hope we have time for some discussion, of course. So any questions, please let me know. Here's a small comic strip on the topic of questions. But yeah, please, you may ask. I haven't been keeping a very close eye on the chat box, so I don't know if there is a question. So thank you so much. I can see a lot of kind comments about the session, so thank you for that. And I think a lot of the feedback that you gave on the chat box as well, a lot of the way in which you people interacted, excellent. So I essentially, you answered my questions for me. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. The session was indeed very engaging and very interactive.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I've also learned a couple of things about using images. And yes, I'll still come back to my point to say that, yes, just like sir mentioned, how you can use images for LSRW, all 4 domains of learning a language. Similarly, it again does refer back to the point that English is a visual language, or any language for that matter. When we teach using visuals, it's always better. The comprehension is better, the memory is better, the interpretation is better, the expression gets better, because you know what you're talking about, what you would like to speak about, or what would you like to write about. So it does inspire audience rather than just having an abstract idea of what you want to say or what you are reading about. Rather than having an image of it, this is what I'm reading, this must be, that will give a vaguer picture than when I'm using images more concrete way. And what I have learned today is that as teachers, we do use images. A lot of you gave examples, and I saw a very interactive session. But a conscious thought on using images for language will make a more difference, a more better impact while teaching language than using it by the way. If we do it more consciously, it's going to be more effective. So on that, yeah.
I think there's a question from Nagadevi. I can see one question there. Is there any way to create a new image? I think it was a direct message, by the way. So I'll just say it for the benefit, read it aloud for the benefit of the others. Is there any way to create a new image on our own by giving certain prompts? If we could unmute
Yeah.
Nagadevi, because I don't understand this question very well. I'll put it in the chat box.
Nagadevi ma'am, you can unmute yourself. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So could you please clarify, is there a way to create a new image on our own by giving certain prompts?
Many teachers, they try to search images in Pinterest or Google or any other ways. Why can't we create any image like that rather than using Paint? Is there any other ways to do that?
Of course, you can create your own image. So, and in fact, it is recommended because sometimes you know best what your learners engage with. So if you can and have the facility and the ability to create those images, I would definitely recommend, yes, please create your own images. But what I did not understand about your question is by giving certain prompts. I didn't understand that.
Some may use that AI for
Like that.
creating images. Is
Oh, yes.
there any other way?
You can use AI engines. Okay, now I understand what you mean by prompts. You're talking about AI prompts. Yes, you
Yes, sir.
can use engines like DAL-E and what are the others? Midjourney and things like that. You can use them. I would, of course, recommend that when you do use it, you can give credit to those engines, saying that this was created using these things. There are certain
Yes.
ethical issues sometimes with image generation through AI, because sometimes what happens it kind of repurposes existing images and things like that. But otherwise, in general, you can. It is a tool, so we can use those tools to generate new images because those creators, AI generative creators exist. We can use them. Yes, you can use them,
Okay.
giving information. You can also create it on your own. There's no problem there. But yeah, they exist and you can use the prompts. And if we give some credit to the AI tool, I think that would be good. But you can use them indeed.
Okay,
Thank
okay,
you.
sir.
Thank you,
Thank you.
sir. Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else has a question? Would you like to raise your hand or put it up on the chat box? For the attendance and the certificate link, yes, we will be sharing the attendance link and the certificate for the certificate and feedback as well. We'll be doing it in the group. So I hope everybody is in the group. So we'll be doing it shortly on the group. Any other question in the meanwhile? Any other question? All right. So on that note, thank you so much, Saurabh sir. Thank you for the wonderful session. We look forward to many more sessions with you in the commune
Sure.
for all our ELT teachers. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. I was happy to be here. See you then. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Teachers who are not in the group, just hang on. I'll just see if I can. So Avantika, do I have you here? Avantika,
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
can we share the feedback link in the chat box?
Yeah, ma'am, sending it right.
Teachers, it's okay, it's okay. I've got a lot of messages saying I'm not in the group. That's absolutely fine. Who are there in the group, you can leave the meeting. We'll be sharing the link in the group also. It's okay. Once you fill the feedback form, we'll add you to the group as well. The link has been shared. There's a link to the feedback. Once you fill in this feedback, you'll get your certificate. An auto-generated certificate will be sent to your email. Yes. So once you fill in the feedback form, we get your details and we'll add you to the group. We will add everyone who's not in the group. We'll add. The only discussion, rest assured, we don't do good mornings and good nights in our groups. We only share information regarding our sessions, the commune sessions. So we'll add you there. Or you can send. Just now you've received a number also. If you would like to be added to the group right away or maybe at the earliest, then if you can just send us a message at this number 78278 02827. Send us a message, a WhatsApp on this number. We'll add you to the group. Or we'll send you a link to be added to the group. Okay. So I hope everybody's gotten the link. Can we log off from the session now? I think everybody's gotten busy filling the feedback form. Okay. Thank you so much. See you all very soon in the next session of Commune. Stay tuned. Thank you.